Hello guys, welcome to my foundation re-review series. This is a series where I sort of pull out foundations that may not have launched very recently. They could be a few months old, a few years old for some, and they're still on the market. There are still a lot of people who are interested in finding out if these are the right foundations for them, but there aren't a lot of new and updated review videos on these anymore because, we get so caught up testing new things as they come out that we sort of neglect a lot of things on the market. I'm going to be starting mostly with foundations that are already in my collection, obviously, but I did throw out a few posts on YouTube and Instagram as well, asking you guys to vote and send me DMs, just telling me which foundation formulas you are interested in me reviewing first, and I prioritize them accordingly. Of course, there may be foundations you're interested in that I don't own, and I'll just be honest, I'm not about to run out and buy every single foundation just to do one video review. I do have too many in my collection already, and I really want to reduce the waste. Even though I say that, I still highly encourage all of you to just drop me a comment below letting me know what foundations you're interested in reviewing. If I can accommodate, I will accommodate. Alright, now that we've got that out of the way, let's just move on to today's review. Based on the DMs that came in, the most requested foundation review was for Makeup Forever's Matte Velvet Skin Compact. Now what this is it's a mattifying powder foundation with high coverage, and it's supposed to hide blemishes, be water resistant, and act like a second skin, blurring your imperfections for a complexion which is free from blemishes and visible pores. It's also available in 30 shades. Just a note on the skincare that's already on my face. I'm trying to keep it quite fresh and quite light today, so I have on Lancome's Advanced Genifique Serum. I have been loving my Saturday Skin Bright Potion, and that's a prebiotic and probiotic serum that really calmed my skin down, and I felt I should really dig out my Advanced Genifique and just try it again for a couple of weeks as well, just to see if, my skin just responds really well to probiotic serums in general, or if the Saturday Skin is really as magic as I think it is. On top of that, I also have my Dr. Jart V7 Toning Cream. Now this is what I consider a very thick, very nourishing, vitamin-enriched cream. And some people, especially in Korea and East Asia, use it as a sort of a brightening cream because it does have a slight white cast to it when you first apply it. But if you're going to be applying makeup on top of it, it really doesn't make any difference. So I don't see it as a tone up cream, which I feel is quite stupid anyway, unless you want to apply it down your entire body. There isn't much of a reason for you to have like a brighter looking face and neck and a dark rest of the body. You get what I mean? Just see this as a very, very nice, very nourishing but non-greasy vitamin cream, which I find is better suited for normal to drier skins in general. I really, really love their new pink toning cream because I used a couple of these sample jars. This one is completely empty, and I do have a large jar of the V7 pink toning cream waiting in the wings, but I do want to use up my humongous full-size jar of the original V7 toning cream before I move on to the new one. So because this is a powder foundation and it's meant to go on top of any base products, concealer, etc. that you're going to be putting on your face to correct, any blemishes, I'm going to be using the UltraHD light capturing self-setting concealer under my eyes and on some discolored spots and marks before I go in with the powder foundation. Now this is obviously not the first time I'm using this. I've used this on and off for several months, and it does have enough coverage to correct quite a bit of dark discolorations around the under eye area. However, I don't like to apply any powder foundation too heavily around the under eye area just because my under eye area is very, very dry, and this is an area that's prone to creasing and movement in general anyway. So I do not want to go in with a heavy enough layer of this to knock out all discolorations around my eyes. Also, another tip to get the best results out of a powder foundation, if you are applying it on top of concealer and you're applying quite a bit of concealer in certain areas like under the eyes, etc., you might want to give it a couple of minutes just to really set and dry down so the surface of the skin has no moisture left. Because if you go in with a very thick and very high coverage powder foundation right on top of very moist or still moist concealer, it can grab and darken some formulations. Now, I'm not a fan of using sponges to sponge on powder foundations because I find that makes it really, really heavy looking most of the time. You can see that mine is still in its plastic wrapping. I didn't use either of these. But because this is a full review and not everyone owns separate face brushes for use with their powder compacts, I'm just going to be using the sponge on this side of my face so you can have a look at how it sits, how it applies the product. And on the other side of my face, I'll just go ahead with my regular brushes. So at the end of the day, if there is any difference, we can all see it for ourselves. This side has a velour velvety flocked texture. It's meant to give you a slightly lighter, more airy application of the product. And the sponge side, this is a very, very fine-grained sponge, very, very smooth. It's going to pack on a lot more coverage than the furry velour side. So you are meant to be able to get two finishes with this sponge. Can you see how much coverage there is on that sponge already just with a few swipes in the compact? So you do want to be careful with the sponge. And here's my tip for application. Don't just go straight in and start smearing around, especially if you have a base or some concealer on already. Don't want to shift that around. What you want to do is just very lightly roll and press to get the product on. See that this side of my face is completely matted down. There is almost no texture visible on camera, and there is a teeny tiny bit of a light reflectiveness left just on the peaks and contours of my face, but this is very, very matte. I did leave my nose bridge there because I don't need coverage here and I don't want to make it overly matte. The nose area is the first place people notice your foundation has started breaking down or that it looks heavy or it looks cakey and textured. So this is the place where I try to avoid applying heavy foundation in general. Okay, now I'm ultra close to the camera and I did turn down the lights a little bit so you can see the texture. It's sitting all right around my eye area. But remember that I have not worn this more than a few minutes, so if it's going to crease when I smile and everything, we're going to see that later. Over the general surface of the skin, it's looking pretty good. It's very fine-grained. It doesn't look like a very heavy layer of foundation. It's not grabbing or emphasizing pores. The one thing I do not like at this point is that it's not evening out the redness around here, and I did apply foundation around the curve of my nostrils. I'm going to go in with a little bit more on the corner of the sponge to see if I can cover up the redness there. This is the second time I'm going in. It evened it out slightly, but not much. You can still see that it's just a light layer of powder over veiny skin. And I do have to say, this is one of the key reasons why I keep this foundation around even though I have dry skin. It actually does not look cakey or heavy or mask-like on the skin, unlike a lot of older powder foundation formulas on dry skin. This also does not have a tendency to grab onto wet spots or damp spots and darken and look cakey. So I'm just gonna finish up this side of my face, and I'm going to be using my face brushes so you can have a look and see if there's any noticeable difference. With a brush like this, I tend to pick a product and then I tap. I bounce the brush on. I do not buff it around. I don't swirl the bristles on the skin, because when you tap and go over the same area a few times, it very, very gently deposits and almost airbrushes the skin in that area using the powder. So this is just a technique or a trick for those of you guys not too familiar with using powders. So on areas where I do not want too much coverage, I buff, I swirl. This gives you a very light layer of powder pigment and it won't look too mask-like. Okay, here is the zoom in on the brush applicator side. It does have heavier coverage where I was tapping the brush a little bit more around the central V zone of my face, which is where we want more coverage typically anyway. So what I get with a brush is more precision coverage where I need it, and then a very light, very soft, more invisible layer over the rest of the face where I may not want as much coverage. Whereas with the sponge, you get a very even coat all over the entire surface of the skin, I find. There's less coverage around the central area of my face, there's more coverage around the outsides. But overall, for the texture and finish and coverage, I find both the sponge and the brush to perform equally well. My face is bouncing back so much light right now that I'm feeling really, really washed out. I'm gonna go off and do the rest of my face, apply a little bit of bronzer and contour and just a little bit more color to my face. And I'll be back in 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're back, and I left my lips undone because I kind of feel like, since we're doing a Makeup Forever test today, and I did use quite a few other Makeup Forever products on the rest of my face. I'm using the Pro Sculpting Duo in number 2 on my cheeks with a very, very light hand, because this can come off a little bit orange, the bronzer at least, on my skin tone. So I used a very, very soft brush, my Wayne Goss 14, just to swipe on a very, very light layer and add some color to my face. I also applied a tiny amount of the highlight to the high points of my face. And for the lips, I've yet to review the Artist Nude creams. I think they have 12 shades in very neutral tones, which launched recently, and I think today I'm just gonna try one of these. I don't want to go too nude, too bronze today, so I'm gonna go with a slightly less beige shade. It does make my lips look a bit bigger, I think, at least on camera. And then I said I'm gonna go out for lunch and I will check back in a few hours. I'm not gonna go in with a setting spray like this one, the Redo setting spray from Beauty Blender, even though this is something I would typically use on my skin just to get a little bit of that glow back and a less powdery look on regular days. But because we are reviewing this foundation and giving a full wear test, I do not want to change how it's going to sit or look on my skin. You guys should be able to see how it performs as is. So I will see you guys in a few hours. Ciao! Hey folks, it is now 3+ p.m. in the afternoon, and I'm just gonna check in and let you guys have a look at the foundation. It's mostly held up okay. I have not blotted or touched up at all today yet. I've been wearing this about 4+ hours at this point, and on large areas it's looking okay. It's not really creasing around my expression lines. The one part where it's worn away is just here at the inner corners, and I think this might be because I accidentally rubbed my eye earlier. I wasn't talking too much today, so there aren't a lot of expression lines around my eye area. For the most part, looking perfectly fine. I was walking about quite a bit. I think about at least 30 minutes of walking, although the weather is pretty cool at the moment, so it's not particularly warm, and I wasn't sweating a lot, so it's held up very well. There's obviously zero oxidation. It's exactly the same color it was when I first applied it in the morning, so I'm just gonna have to try and touch this up. Okay, I've got a little bit on the sponge right in the corner. Let me see if this works. Actually, that touched it up fine. I'm surprised. It kind of just filled in that gap completely. Good as new. Hey guys, we're back and it is now 6:30 p.m. and I have been wearing this foundation now for close to 8 hours at this point. Usually I like to give it about 8-9 hours at least through the day, being out and about just to see how it holds up. And I was out in the afternoon for a few hours. I was walking outside in the sun, and it held up pretty nicely, but I'm gonna zoom you in because I think it has just about started to break down around some of my oilier areas. So you can see that it's no longer matte at this point. To be fair, I did not blot my foundation at all. I used no blotting sheets. And besides touching up a tiny bit under my right eye here where the foundation wore off a little bit in the afternoon, I really did not top up more powder on top of what I applied in the morning. On my drier areas, this is held up perfectly. It did not crease around my under eye areas, surprisingly. For powder foundation, but on the oilier zones you can see that it is shining, and around the nostrils it's not looking the best anymore at this point. And I did also apply a little bit of concealer to an old acne mark here and here, and I'm not sure how visible it is on camera, but it is starting to look a little bit patchy to me because there's a bit more shine in that area as well. So as usual, I'm going to go in with a blotting sheet just to see if it's intact after I lift some of the oil off. It was a fair amount of oil, actually. It shifted slightly around my nose area where I blotted. You can see that the foundation kind of went patchy here, and there's a line of demarcation here. And now that I've lifted the oil away, it's sort of gone matte again, and I can't really smooth it out. You know how it is. I probably would have been able to smooth and rub it out before I blotted, but once I lifted off the oil, it's almost like the foundation set back down and it's adhering to my skin again. I'm not really wanting to budge anymore. So you can consider that a good point actually, because it stays intact. And as long as you don't rub your face when you're sweaty or when you're shiny, and you just lift off the oil gently, it goes right back. Of course, it's also still looking patchy here on the spot where I applied some concealer under the powder foundation. It's not looking too great up close. From a distance, it still looks fantastic, I think. Especially if you want that very flawless, poreless, matte look. So, would I wear this out for a whole long day if I need to go out after work? Possibly. I mean, it's easy to touch up. I was actually surprised how easy it was to just fill in that little smear or gap under my eyes in the middle of the day. And everything looks seamless right after I touch it up again, so I really do like that. It did not darken, it did not cake up in areas where I had to layer a little bit more product on in the middle of the day either, so that worked out really, really good. Overall, it does look very good. even now after close to 8 hours of wear, and I was out and about. It's not a particularly hot day, so I was not sweating up a storm, but I think I've worn this enough times to know that it does manage to last pretty well. It is very, very good coverage, and even on my dry skin, it's not uncomfortable. I mentioned earlier in the day that to get rid of that powdery, very, very matte appearance, I like to go in with something like the Beauty Blender Redo Setting Spray. This is a spray that has some milky oil emulsion suspended in water. So it goes on as a very fine mist. It doesn't really smear or break down your makeup over the day, but it does help to give it a little bit more life. You know, if you have dry skin and you want something that's quick, easy to go, like a powder foundation, but you don't like that very dry, very matte look, you may want to look into investing in something like this just to supplement your routine. But if you have oily skin, normal skin, or you live in a humid place, I dare say within 1 or 2 hours the foundation actually settles and it looks pretty skin-like. Still matte, still quite velvety, but not unnatural looking. So I haven't changed my opinion about it. It is still one of my favorite powder foundations on the market. And I know people with oily skin also really like this as well. You may need to touch up a little bit more through the day than someone with dry skin like me. I do remember though, on days when I had a little bit of flakiness, or you know, if you have oily skin but you have flaky bits from recovering acne and all that, you want to be a bit careful with this formulation because the powders will gather and grab around flakes, especially around very, very dry, uneven patches. So if you have some texture problems, you may want to look out for that. I don't hesitate to recommend this if you live in a hot place, if you want a very matte, velvety, perfected skin look in general, and you don't have a lot of flaky spots to worry about, then I say give this a shot. That brings me to the end of my first re-review foundation video. I hope you guys found this helpful. I think the next one that is coming up is either Lancome Tanti Dole foundation or YSL All Hours. So be on the lookout for that as well. And in the meantime, I hope you guys have a great week. I'll see you guys soon. Bye!